Yo, it's Bogue. Welcome back to the Beyond the Wormhole series in Kerbal Space Program. Today I'm taking this giant rocket that I've built to the brown dwarf star system MAELG in the Kcalbeloh Planet Pack Mod. And to do that, we're going to be using another mod which adds some new parts to the game called the Near Future Technologies mod, which is actually a group of mods created by forum user Nertea, which also did the station parts expansion Redux that I covered in my last video that just added some new space station parts. But essentially this mod pack of parts adds some just near future technologies to essentially expand the KSB tech tree and include new technologies that are based in real science. And I'm going to be using some of these parts to get my Kerbols all the way beyond the wormhole and to the brown dwarf star system today using this craft here. And so this craft uses a interesting engine called a Magnetoplasmadynamic engine, which, if my memory serves me, is a propulsion system that uses a giant electromagnet to accelerate ionized gas or plasma to produce thrust through an engine. I'll attach a link to a really good video explaining what this is, but it's a real technology based in real science that we can achieve in some capacity today. But the constraint with this technology is that an immense amount of power is required to electromagnetically ionize the propellant and propel it through the engine at to get the thrust that we need. And luckily, the Near Future Technologies mod includes a bunch of different kinds of nuclear reactors that we can put on our craft to generate the amount of power that we would need to run this system. And so I'm going to be using a reactor from this mod called the Excalibur Fission Reactor. This will provide enough power for our engine here. But one thing you have to also consider is that you're going to need to load up on radiators to make sure that the heat level of the reactor doesn't get too hot, or else it'll melt down. And you can monitor that in your by left clicking on the engine. I'll show that later in flight. But now that this craft is all stacked and ready to go, let's head over to the launch pad and I'll launch this up into orbit. Okay, let's throttle up. There we have liftoff off the pad, and I'll just begin the process of my gravity turn. I usually aim to be at about 90 degrees westward as I start to hit that second block of atmosphere in the darker blue there. And so I'm going to have my first stage separation. I'm going to be detaching the two radial boosters on the side here. There they go, just nice and easy, didn't blow up anything like they usually do. We're starting to heat up here as we pop through the outer layers of the atmosphere, and we're just going to be coasting up to our apoapsis, where we will complete a circularization burn to finalize our circular orbit around Kerbin. So I'll let you guys watch for just a second here while I finish that up. Okay, looks like we've circularized. Let me just finish that up with my orbital insertion stage, detach the main stage. But now we have to set up our Sarnus Transfer window, which is the Saturn analog that is added to the game by the Outer Planets mod Kerbal System expansion. Depending on whether you have that installed, the Kcalbeloh System mod will place the wormhole that connects to that system either around Sarnus or around Jool, so you don't have to worry about that. This nice little that little crew cockpit that I was just looking at there was also added to the game courtesy of the Near Future Technologies mod. And so yeah, there's just a lot of cool parts. I highly recommend it. It looks like I'm just setting up my final burn to escape the Kerbal system, which means we're going to have to activate our reactor and our Magnetoplasmadynamic engine. And so here I have this little sub-menu. I've just activated the reactor and my radiators and the engine, and I'm starting to accelerate out of the Kerbal system. And now something that you're going to want to check is that you are radiating heat away from your reactor at a rate where you're not going to be going over your overheat temperature, but also you want to be generating enough power for whatever engine you're using. And in this case, I have just barely enough power that I can generate with this generator to keep this engine running at full throttle, but you can also adjust the power setting of your engine, or not your engine, your reactor, which will also affect the thrust of your engine, because these engines, like this Magnetoplasmadynamic engine, kind of works in the same way that a jet engine does, where it kind of takes, it reads the electricity as kind of almost like its air intake, in a way that some of the engines do. So like the amount of electricity that is being fed affects its fuel flow, if that makes sense. But I've got an asparagus stage setup here. I've got all these radial tanks, and I carry lithium gas fuel for this engine here. Looks like I just have to adjust my power setting to make sure I'm not flaming out of my electric charge, if you will. So you can set it at a rate where you're burning, or you're firing your engine at a power level that you can generate enough electricity for, so you can make some adjustments there. But like I was saying, this is an asparagus stage setup craft, so these radial tanks, they'll detach 2 by 2 in a rotating rate that'll feed into the other tanks, and that preserves your efficiency and your wet to dry mass ratio. And so yeah, I'm just completing that first interplanetary burn to kick our apoapsis up to the height of Sarnus. We'll have our encounter in just a second. Looks like we've got our encounter there. And I'm pretty sure that I'm close to being ready for one of my first staging of, there we go, of these radial tanks. So we're letting those empty ones go to save on some weight. And then we're going to have to just do some course correction burns at our ascending descending nodes to just align our flyby of the Sarnus system, so that we can actually just kind of like thread the needle with our trajectory through the wormhole that orbits the gas giant, so that we don't have to circularize or waste any fuel doing that whole thing, so we can just fly straight through the wormhole and preserve our kind of orbital velocity around the star on the other side of the wormhole. It's a trick I've been doing in this planet pack for almost the entirety of my series, and I've also just completed our inclination match burn, and now I just have to go ahead and set up that through the needle flyby of the wormhole that I was talking about. And one thing I should also mention is that your nuclear reactors in this mod have a half-life. Basically, your nuclear fuel will run out at a certain point, and your reactor will become inoperable. So what I recommend doing to preserve the lifespan of your reactor, if you're going to be doing like these multi-decade long missions, is to not keep it running all the time. Just activate it for your really long burns in between. I've also noticed that in like long time warp, sometimes the heating will glitch and then your whole craft will just explode. So it's always good practice to not time warp, like non-physics time warp, like the really extreme time warp with your reactor on, and it actually saves on the lifespan of your reactor anyways. And so I've actually just completed, while I was talking about that, I just completed my encounter with the wormhole in the Sarnus system. It's this guy that I've set as my target. I have to adjust my flyby a little bit more, because you actually have to enter the wormhole below 30,000 meters to actually enter it. So that's what I'm trying to set up here. You can see a few craft that I've placed around the wormhole from my last video, where I put a space station around it. You can see what I was saying here, like you gotta turn off your reactor when you're not using it, and then start it when you are about to use it again. That's probably a best practice if I could like give you guys some advice on this mod. But yeah, okay, it looks like I've got a pretty close flyby. I just have to adjust that inclination. Okay, it looks like we're kind of matched. We're all flat, and now all that's left to do is to just coast ahead till we intercept the wormhole. As I'm warping ahead into the Sarnus system, you can see it on your left there. That's actually the gas giant. on our left. We're not going to be getting too close to it though, because the wormhole orbits quite a distance from the planet. And there we are, there's the wormhole. I'll be just kind of letting you guys watch as we enter. Okay, looks like we're on the other side, safe and sound. We're in the Kcalbeloh system, so I have to zoom out all the way into interstellar space and select my highlighted Kcalbeloh system. And so the Kcalbeloh system has 3 stars, actually, not including the black hole itself. And this system here is the one that it spits you out of on the other side of the wormhole, called the Sarnus system. It's a main sequence star that's just a little bit smaller than Kerbin. And it looks like our trajectory has placed us on a solar orbit around Sunork, and we're going to be dropping down to this redder star orbit closer to the black hole. That's our brown dwarf. And so to get a trajectory that hits it at a lower orbit, you have to exit your solar orbit in the opposite direction that your star is facing. So, or not facing, traveling. So I've just started a burn to escape the Sunork system in a retrograde direction relative to Sunork's movement, and that will lower my periapsis on the other side of the black hole, which kind of acts like a giant star that all these other stars are orbiting, if you will. And I guess while we wait for this burn to finish, now might be a good time to talk about why I used these near future technology parts in this mission. I've been doing a mostly stock playthrough of the Kcalbeloh system, and so like the most Delta V I've ever managed to coax out of a stock part craft with like the nuclear engine, which is like the most efficient vacuum engine in Kerbal Space Program, at least for stock parts. The most I've ever really managed to coax out of it is like with a lander payload that is like around 20,000 meters per second, maybe 25,000 meters per second. And I usually even do some refueling, especially if I'm going to the binary star system outside of the Sunork system, and then all the way back to the Kerbal system. So these parts from the near future technologies mod have a better efficiency, and I think it takes like at least 15,000 meters per second to get down to the brown dwarf, even with some of the gravity assists that I've been using. So we kind of just need these near future technology parts to get to these systems that are closer to the black hole. It takes a ton of Delta V to circularize at such a low altitude around the black hole. And so we've actually just, while I was explaining that, we actually have left the Sunork system behind us, and now I've set the brown dwarf system as my target, and we're going to do a inclination match burn so that we can make sure that our plane of our orbit is lined up so that we can be able to have a really nice and clean flyby on the same plane as the brown dwarf. But yeah, like I was saying, these engines from the near future technologies mod have a way higher initial specific impulse than maybe the NERV in the stock, or the NERV nuclear engine, I should say, in the stock KSP game. And so initial specific impulse is basically another word for your like engine efficiency, or basically how much change in velocity can this engine provide. That's what like Delta V is kind of a measure of in my amateur understanding. But it looks like while I was talking about all that stuff, it looks like we've matched our inclination to the brown dwarf, and it's got a pretty large gravity well. It looks like on our next pass we have a natural encounter with it, and so we're actually going to be using some of these flybys here to slow down around it, to kind of, it's like a gravity assist, like a braking gravity assist, kind of like we would use around Tylo or Slate. Slate is the Tylo-like moon of Sarnus, and Tylo is a moon that we commonly use to gravity assist brake around the Jool system. So I've just tweaked my flyby so that my resulting orbit is as close as possible to the brown dwarf's orbit. That basically shows that you've executed a really efficient gravity assist, or a gravity brake in this instance, because I'm using this gravity assist to slow down my speed relative to the black hole, making my orbit more similar to the brown dwarf orbit, which I guess causes it essentially causes it it makes it so that I have to spend less fuel to circularize on my next flyby, if that makes sense. Because we're going from this a lot larger blue orbit to that smaller resulting purple orbit, if that makes sense. I am so sorry for all of the rambling that has gone on in this video. Hopefully, if you guys have any questions, please just comment and I'll try my best to answer all of your questions. I've kind of started this series just trying to like make these planet packs and these parts a little bit more accessible to the average Kerbal Space Program player. But yeah, I'm just warping ahead to my first flyby of the brown dwarf here, so we'll be able to see it really soon. And there it is. We're a lot closer to the black hole than we have been in previous episodes. Looks like you can almost see a planet there orbiting the brown dwarf. We just have to complete our flyby there, and it looks like our resulting orbit's pretty similar to the brown dwarf, so it looks like we've saved a lot of fuel with that gravity assist there. Looks like on our next pass we should have looks like we have a flyby already. And now I'm going to actually adjust my flybys to prepare to capture. And so I'm lining up my flyby with the target planet of this mission to land on, which is a little eyeball desert planet called Mehtna. Yeah, looks like we've got that all lined up. I have to shut down that nuclear reactor so I don't explode. But I'm just setting up that capture burn there, and I'll warp ahead till I'm in the system. The brown dwarf should be in sight in just under 3 years as I swing around this orbit here. Now that we're in the sphere of influence, you should be able to see it. There it is. In just a second, I'll start getting ready. There we go. I'm lining up to perform that that capture burn, burning retrograde to slow down so that we can stay in orbit around the brown dwarf MAELG. That's the name, MAELG, which is actually gleam backwards, probably because of the kind of like permanent golden hour that the light is like around this star. It's not very bright. It's like just the step beyond a hot Jupiter. You can kind of almost see like in the I don't know what you would call it, like the exosphere, like the outer layers of the star's atmosphere. Kind of almost looks like Jupiter there, but it's like superheated to the point where it's a brown dwarf and no longer a hot Jupiter. But yeah, I'll let you guys just watch while I finish this burn. Looks like we've captured. Got to make sure to shut down that generator after our burn is done. And I've set Mehtna, which is that eyeball planet that we're going to, as my target. We're going to do another inclination matching burn at one of my descending or ascending nodes relative to the planet. So I'll just warp ahead till I hit one of those. Looks like we just have about a 500 meters per second burn. Not too bad. Looks like we're going to have to stage another one of our radial tanks in just a minute, though. Look at that black hole in the background. That's crazy. Turn off that reactor. Okay, so now we are good to set up an encounter. Looks like I got one pretty quick. Just 12 meters per second till we get our encounter. And then we'll just be one more step to go till we're arrived at the planet, just to circularize around the planet when we do our flyby. And it's a really huge burn. Looks like it's 3,000 meters per second. So that's going to be a really big burn. I hope I have enough thrust to weight ratio to complete that burn before we fly on past it. My thrust to weight ratio is not that great. I'm trying to pack as much fuel as possible, so I think I only have like a thrust to weight ratio of like 1 or like 0.15. So not a very fast craft, but it is packing a lot of fuel. Okay, it looks like it's going to be about 12 minutes, 13 minutes, something like that. Let me start that reactor and fire up this puppy. Maybe I'll throw up the power setting a little bit so I can get more thrust. And there's the interior of that capsule from the Near Future Technologies mod pack. Pretty cool. So you can see my radiators start to heat up from the generator. I'm going to have to stage some of those radial tanks in a second. The surface texturing of this planet is really cool. Okay, looks like we have to drop off those tanks. Looks like we're going to be a little bit late to circularize around the planet. But we can always adjust that later. Cool. These are our first views captured in orbit around Mehtna, the eyeball planet orbiting the brown dwarf in the Kcalbeloh system. So this guy's got an atmosphere. I'm not quite sure how thick, but I think it's similar to Duna's actually in thickness, so not too thick. And I think it might just be a little bit larger actually than Duna. We're just gonna turn the user interface off for just a few seconds to get some cool screenshots, some cool views of the Mehtna system. So something about this planet kind of gives me the creeps actually. It's really cool, but that kind of like big scorched center of the planet, that's something called an eyeball planet, where a planet that's tidally locked to its star, which means it orbits pretty close, that the tidal forces of the star has actually slowed the planet's rotation to where the same side of the planet faces the star at all times, kind of causes that like scorched effect of that side of the planet that always faces the star. That's why there's that giant big eyeball spot on the other side of the planet. There's another planet in the Kcalbeloh system called Seleuco that also is tidally locked and has a scorch mark, kind of making it look like an eyeball. But something interesting about these kinds of planets is that we find them pretty commonly in like real life exoplanets, because a lot of the exoplanets that we find are orbiting red dwarfs, or like smaller stars. Makes them a little bit easier to spot among all the glare of the star and the relative size difference. But yeah, a lot of these stars are pretty small, and these planets orbit pretty close, so they're close enough to be tidally locked. And we think a lot of the planets around maybe Proxima Centauri b or the TRAPPIST-1 system are all supposed to be tidally locked eyeball planets or something like that, from what I remember. But that's what makes planets like these kind of interesting to me, especially. Looks like we're just finishing up our perfect circularization around the planet. Should be getting ready to pick out a landing spot really soon here, after I make a quick save. Alright, now that the sun is up on this side of the planet, I'm going to get into my little lander here, my Kerbal, and do a little retrograde burn so that we can lower our orbit to dip into the atmosphere so we can start our landing. I'm going to be using parachutes, which will help us save a bunch of fuel. Yeah, let you guys watch. And look at that. It's like a black hole sunrise. Gotta play like Black Hole Sun by Soundgarden or something. Maybe the Kerbals are listening to Black Hole Sun on their iPod Shuffle that they packed with their snacks in this little lander can, while we plasmify the gas around us as we plummet through the atmosphere. You know how it is. Looks like we're going to land in this little outcropping, this kind of like canyon cliff wall kind of formation here. That looks pretty cool. We've deployed our drogues and our main chutes. Still going pretty fast, so hopefully those slow us down a little bit more when they open up. And look at that view. And so this kind of gloomy atmosphere, or these gloomy horizons, or the way this planet looks, it's 24/7. It kind of makes this planet feel like a zombie planet, or like an undead planet. It's frozen in time. Now that we've landed, About to take our first steps. Plant a flag. Let's plant that flag real quick. Let's do some science too while we're at it, after I take some sick screenshots. Let's do that science there. I'll just dink around on the surface a little bit more and take in the sights, you know, in true Kerbal fashion. That's my favorite part about every mission. Wait, I gotta turn the lights off in my little lander here. I don't want to run out of electricity. Let me do that real quick. We got enough electricity, we're good. Yeah. Check out some sunrises. But, it's only like the black hole that ever rises or sets on this planet, because it's tidally locked to the brown dwarf. So the brown dwarf kind of just like wobbles in the same position in the sky, day in and day out. So on this side of the planet, it's never truly nighttime. But yeah, that's about it for today, guys. In our next video, we'll be going to another minor planet that orbits around the brown dwarf. It's pretty cool. We'll be able to pass by a lot closer to the brown dwarf in that planet. I got a sneak peek for you guys, but I'll see you guys then.